People tell you that meeting the right person is supposed to make every other decision easier. What nobody warns you about is that sometimes the person who feels right can still lead you toward the worst choice of your life. I did not discover the truth in one explosive moment. It arrived gradually, in details so small that I kept explaining them away. A hesitation before an answer. A name that never came up. A family story that seemed painful enough that asking questions felt cruel. I ignored each piece because I was 35, successful, and happier than I had been in years. Her name was Megan. For 14 months, I believed she was the woman I would grow old beside. My name is Nikolaos Papadimitriou, though everyone who knows me calls me Nico. I run a commercial real estate company in Metro Detroit. Our main office is in Birmingham, Michigan, in the center of Oakland County. My father, Stavros, started the business in the 1980s with one borrowed desk, one second-hand car, and the kind of confidence that makes sensible people nervous. I joined him when I was 26. Together, we expanded it into a firm large enough that my late grandfather would have considered it proof that his sacrifices meant something. But money was never the center of our home. Family was. We are Greek American, 3 generations deep in Michigan. My parents still live in the same Grosse Pointe house they bought after their wedding. Sunday dinner is not an invitation. It is an obligation treated with the seriousness of a court appearance. My mother, Eleni, has made spanakopita from scratch every week since before I was born, and refusing a second piece is interpreted as a personal attack. My uncle Theo lives 12 minutes away and has never once believed a closed front door applied to him. He arrives without warning, opens the refrigerator as if he pays the mortgage, and complains if there is no strong coffee waiting. My cousin Nick Jr., his wife, my parents, and whichever relative happens to be passing through usually fill the table. We are loud. We interrupt each other. We argue over food while reaching across one another to serve more of it. We do not love quietly, and we do not welcome people halfway. So when I tell you that I met Megan at a charity fundraiser in Birmingham and was completely captivated within 3 months, understand what that meant for someone like me. I do not fall quickly. I do not trust easily. Before Megan, I had been in 2 serious relationships. Neither ended with betrayal or screaming. They simply faded when we admitted we wanted different futures. I had come to believe love was something sensible adults negotiated carefully. Then Megan walked into the fundraiser wearing a black dress that probably cost more than the first car I ever drove. Within 5 minutes, Uncle Theo made a terrible joke involving Greek yogurt and real estate taxes. Megan laughed as though it were genuinely funny. Then she turned to my mother and asked about the filling in the appetizer she had just eaten. Not the polite kind of question people ask before escaping. She wanted the recipe. My mother took hold of her arm and talked for 45 minutes. I stood across the room watching them and thought, so this is how it happens. Megan worked in corporate marketing for a wealth management firm in downtown Detroit. She was warm, polished, intelligent, and effortlessly social. She knew how to enter a room without demanding attention and still become the person everyone remembered afterward. She made me feel interesting without flattering me and calm without making me feel managed. We dated for 14 months. By the 2nd month, she was attending Sunday dinner. By the 4th, she knew Uncle Theo's chair and never sat in it. By the 6th, my mother had stopped asking whether she was coming and simply prepared food for her. Our family absorbed Megan in the way Greek families absorb people they approve of, immediately, completely, and with unreasonable quantities of pastry. I proposed on the rooftop of the Shinola Hotel in downtown Detroit on a Tuesday evening near the end of spring. There were flowers, a photographer hidden badly behind a planter, and a ring I had spent weeks choosing. Megan said yes before I finished the question. My mother cried when I called. My father said, "Good. Now bring her Sunday so your mother can feed her properly." Uncle Theo already knew, though no one admitted telling him. I was happy. Not cautiously happy. not waiting for the other shoe happy. I was embarrassingly, completely happy. And I had no idea what Megan was building beneath that happiness. Before we continue, get comfortable. This is not a story about someone being fooled because he was stupid. It is about how intelligent people can ignore the truth when the lie gives them the future they desperately want. Tell me where you are watching from, and stay with me, because the most dangerous part of this story is not the deception itself. It is how natural the deception felt while I was living inside it. The first thing you need to understand about Megan is that she never behaved like a cold person. She was affectionate. She remembered small details. She sent my mother flowers after a minor surgery and brought my father a book about Detroit architecture because he had mentioned wanting it once. When I worked late, she ordered food to my office without asking what I wanted because she already knew. That is why the story she told about her family did not sound like a warning. It sounded like an old injury. About 6 weeks into our relationship, we were sitting on the couch in her midtown apartment. There were takeout cartons on the coffee table and a television show playing that neither of us was watching. I asked whether her parents lived nearby. Her expression changed, not dramatically, only enough that I immediately regretted asking. "My parents and I do not have a relationship," she said. I waited. They were very controlling when I was growing up. Critical. My father especially. Everything had conditions attached. I had to create real distance before I could function as an adult. She looked tired rather than theatrical, like someone repeating a truth that had already been examined from every angle. "I even stopped using my family name online," she continued. "I needed space from them and from people who knew them." "I am sorry," I said, "because what else do you say when someone places pain in your hands?" "It is okay. I have dealt with it. I just do not discuss them much." Then she added the sentence that should have received more attention from me. "They will not be at the wedding. I need you to be comfortable with that." I told her I was. And I meant it. I trusted her because, at that point, she had given me no visible reason not to. I also knew enough about difficult families to believe that reconciliation was not always healthy. I did not want to become another man telling a woman she owed access to people who had hurt her. What I failed to consider was how differently my family would experience that silence. The Papadimitriou family operates on a particular frequency. We believe you understand a person better when you know the table where they learn to eat, the people who taught them to argue, and the stories everyone repeats at holidays. It is not only curiosity. It is context. By the 11th month of our engagement, the absence of Megan's family had begun making its own kind of noise. The subject finally surfaced during a Sunday dinner in late July. My mother had made pasticcio, the real version that takes half of Saturday and every pan in the kitchen. Around the table sat my parents, Megan, Uncle Theo, Nick Jr., his wife, and me. The evening was warm and ordinary until Theo put down his fork and looked directly at Megan. "Megan, sweetheart, I have to ask you something." She smiled. "Of course, Theo. Where are your people?" The entire table went quiet. Megan's smile remained, but something behind it tightened. "My parents and I are not in contact. I have mentioned that." "You mentioned it," Theo said. "I am asking about it." My father's voice came low and firm. "Theo." But Theo had already opened the door everyone else had carefully avoided. "I am not trying to insult you," he said. "But in our family, you do not marry someone when nobody has ever met anyone from her side. It is not how we understand things." "Theo," my father repeated. This time, he picked up his fork. The conversation moved on, but the question remained seated among us. After dinner, Megan left early, saying she had work to finish. I walked her to her car. She kissed me, told me she loved me, and said she understood that Theo meant well. There was no anger, no defensive argument, nothing that made me think she had been threatened by the question. Later, my father found me alone in the kitchen. He poured a small glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "She is a good woman," he said. "She is. I believe you." He nodded, then looked toward the doorway to make sure my mother was not listening, which was pointless because my mother is always listening. "But, Nico, we are going to stand in a church. You will make promises before God and both families. Except there will be only one family in the room. Her parents were toxic, Bob. She had a difficult childhood." "I hear you. I believe that she believes what she told you." That wording caught my attention, though not enough. He set down his glass. "Toxic people still live somewhere. They have names. They have an address. I am not asking you to repair anything. I am asking you to know what you are marrying into." I did not answer. He placed one hand on my shoulder and returned to the dining room. I stood in my parents' kitchen for a long time, staring at the empty plates. Here is the strange part. I still was not suspicious of Megan. I was afraid of her parents. On the drive back to Midtown, one thought kept returning: what if they met me and decided I was not good enough for their daughter? That may sound ridiculous coming from a man with a successful company and a family that would have welcomed nearly anyone Megan loved. But Megan moved through a world of corporate executives, graduate degrees, private clubs, carefully selected wine, and apartments designed like magazine spreads. Her friends wore labels I sometimes had to search online. She carried herself with a polish I admired but occasionally found intimidating. I worried that her parents might be the same way. Perhaps they were wealthy, severe, and obsessed with status. Perhaps they would look at my family's noise, our food, Uncle Theo's complete inability to whisper, and decide I was too much, too ethnic, too loud, too close to my parents, too unwilling to treat marriage as a private arrangement between two individuals. Maybe Megan had escaped them because she was better than they were. Maybe meeting me would remind her of the life she had tried to leave behind. That was the fear in my head when I drove north on Interstate 75 one Saturday morning in August. I did not think I was going to uncover a lie. I thought I was going to introduce myself to intimidating people and try to convince them I deserved their daughter. Finding them did not require a detective. It began with paperwork. By the 11th month of our engagement, Megan had moved into a high-rise condo downtown owned by one of our companies. Because we were getting married and combining certain financial responsibilities, our legal department needed her added to the master lease. My office manager placed the completed documents on my desk one Friday afternoon. I glanced at the state identification Megan had uploaded. The legal name read, Megan Melissa Bennett. Not Ashford. Ashford was the name she used socially and online. I remembered her saying she had distanced herself from her family name. That part appeared to be true. Out of what I told myself was harmless curiosity, I searched the public property database. A few records led to an old social media profile untouched since college, then to a residential address on Maple Avenue in Saginaw, Michigan. About an hour and 40 minutes north. I told Megan I had a property walkthrough outside the city. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The drive gave me too much time to rehearse. I practiced the respectful introduction. I imagined a guarded father opening a large door. I imagined a mother examining my suit, my watch, my surname, and my intentions. I prepared to accept whatever coldness they offered without becoming defensive. I entered Saginaw before 10 in the morning. The GPS led me into a neighborhood of modest ranch homes, trimmed lawns, small porches, and American flags. It was the kind of block where people knew the names of neighbors' dogs and waved from driveways. I slowed down. The house was a neat one-story ranch with pale siding, a flower bed along the front path, and wind chimes hanging near the porch. An older man stood in the yard watering flowers. He wore a faded Detroit Tigers shirt and reading glasses pushed above his forehead. I parked across the street and remained in the car for 5 full minutes. This was not the scene I had prepared for. There was no gate, no luxury vehicle, no cold architecture meant to announce importance. The driveway held an older sedan and a pickup truck with a dent in the rear panel. These were not intimidating people. They were ordinary people. For one brief moment, I felt relieved. I stepped from the car and walked up the driveway. The man noticed me when I was about 10 feet away and narrowed his eyes with the reasonable caution of someone watching a stranger approach his home. "Can I help you?" I stopped. "Sir, you do not know me. My name is Nico Papadimitriou. I am engaged to your daughter, Megan." Gerald Bennett did not fumble the garden hose. He released it completely. Water slid across the driveway while he stared at me. Then his face collapsed. Not with anger. Not suspicion. Relief. The kind of relief that only appears when grief has been waiting so long it no longer expects an answer. "Nancy," he called, and his voice broke on her name. "Nancy, come outside." In that moment, standing beside a spreading stream of water while a retired postal worker tried to compose himself, everything I believed about Megan's family shifted. Inside the Bennett home, my understanding of my fiancée began coming apart quietly. Nancy placed coffee in front of me even though I had not requested it. She brought out a plate of store-bought cookies and apologized that they were not homemade. Her hands shook when she sat down. The house was clean, modest, and filled with Megan. There were school photographs in the hallway, birthday pictures on a bookshelf, a prom photograph on the mantel. A framed college graduation portrait showed Gerald and Nancy standing on either side of their daughter, both of them so visibly proud that looking at it felt invasive. These did not look like parents who had erased a child. They looked like parents whose child had erased them. Gerald had delivered mail for 31 years. Nancy had worked as a school secretary in the Saginaw district. They had saved carefully and paid Megan's way through the University of Michigan without leaving her with student debt. Gerald repeated that detail twice, not to boast, but because it had been one of the proudest achievements of their lives. After Megan moved to Detroit, things changed gradually. Calls became shorter. Visits grew less frequent. She began using Ashford, her middle name, in social circles. Online photographs showed parties and events filled with people her parents had never met. Her appearance, her speech, and even the stories she told about childhood began shifting. Gerald and Nancy tried not to interfere. They assumed their daughter was building an adult identity and needed space. Then came the wedding conversation. Megan asked them for $100,000. I thought I had misheard. 100,000? I repeated. Nancy looked down. She said it was what a proper wedding required, Gerald said. She said your family would expect something impressive from her side. My chest tightened. They did not have that kind of money available without damaging their retirement. They offered $15,000. Everything they believed they could give safely. Megan's response was one sentence. "If you cannot invest in my future, you do not belong in it." She blocked their numbers that night. Nancy left the table and returned with a small stack of envelopes tied with ribbon. Birthday cards. Christmas cards. Notes sent on anniversaries and ordinary days. Most had been returned unopened. She selected one and slid it toward me. Across the front, in red ink, were the words "Return to sender." The return label carried the address of the condo Megan shared with me. My address. I stared at it, then slowly removed my phone from my pocket. A message from Megan had arrived the previous evening. "Babe, amazing news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything, and they wanted to meet you for lunch tomorrow before leaving on a trip. I cannot wait for you to finally meet them." I turned the screen toward Gerald and Nancy. Neither of them spoke. Nancy read the message twice. Then she set my phone down as carefully as if sudden movement might break something else. Gerald looked out the kitchen window toward the flowers he had been watering when I arrived. I thought about the entire drive north. I had practiced convincing these people I was worthy. I had feared they would be wealthy, severe, or embarrassed by my family. The person who had decided someone was not good enough was not Gerald. It was not Nancy. It was Megan. And it had always been Megan. The man who drove back toward Detroit that afternoon was not the same man who had traveled north. On the way up, I wanted approval. On the way home, I wanted the full truth. There is a difference between a competent liar and an exceptional one. A competent liar becomes nervous when the truth approaches. An exceptional liar remains perfectly in character. I did not confront Megan when I returned. That decision matters. I parked beneath our building shortly after 2 and sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes. I was not frozen. I was choosing. My father once told me, the person who reacts first usually gives away the strongest position. Let a liar complete the lie. Half a lie creates an argument. A finished lie creates evidence. I rode the elevator upstairs. Before opening the apartment door, I listened. A television played softly. Megan moved around the living room, entirely calm. When I entered, she sat on the couch with a glass of white wine and her laptop open to a wedding venue website. She smiled. "How was the walkthrough?" "Promising. Long drive." "You look tired. Want me to order dinner?" What I wanted was to place the returned birthday card in front of her and demand an explanation. Instead, I said, "Sure. Whatever you want." I sat beside her. She rested her head against my shoulder for a moment and continued scrolling through photographs of table settings. I looked at the screen and saw nothing. That night, while Megan slept, I organized the facts the same way I handled a complicated real estate deal. Facts first. Assumptions second. Questions last. Megan's legal surname was Bennett. Her parents were Gerald and Nancy Bennett of Saginaw. They were alive. They were not hiding. They had paid for her education, offered $15,000 toward the wedding, and been cut off because the amount failed to meet her demand. Megan had told me they were abusive. While I sat in their kitchen, she sent a message claiming those same parents had apologized and wanted lunch. That meant she had arranged for someone else to appear. The only question was who. I did not have to wait long for clues. Over the next 3 days, I listened differently. I did not search her phone. I did not follow her. I simply heard conversations with the knowledge that every sentence might operate on 2 levels. Megan began mentioning her boss, Robert Callahan, with unusual frequency. Robert thinks the Henderson account will close early. Vivian attended that same charity event. Robert said the market is shifting. Vivian loves that restaurant. Each mention was casual. None was suspicious alone. Together, they felt like advanced preparation, the way someone introduces names repeatedly so they will feel familiar when they suddenly become important. I searched Robert Callahan from my office with the door closed. He was a senior vice president at Megan's firm, a prominent wealth management company headquartered downtown. His corporate portrait showed a silver-haired man in his late 50s with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent decades being welcomed into every room. His wife, Vivian, appeared beside him in society photographs from charity galas. She was elegant, poised, and connected to nearly every institution wealthy Detroit families enjoy supporting. They were exactly the kind of people someone might select to impress a traditional family. I leaned back and studied their photographs. At first, anger told me Megan was simply a calculating con artist. Then something more complicated became visible. She was imprisoned by her own insecurity. Megan had spent years constructing a more polished version of herself in Detroit. She changed the names she used, edited her history, and surrounded herself with people who reinforced the life she wanted others to see. Her parents' modest home, ordinary careers, and financial limitations did not fit the image. When Gerald refused to sacrifice retirement savings for a single wedding day, Megan did not experience it as a practical boundary. She experienced it as exposure. To preserve the illusion, she had to erase the people who knew where she came from. But why would Robert and Vivian agree to pretend they were her parents? They were not foolish people. Megan must have given them a story compassionate enough to make the request seem honorable. Perhaps she said her real parents were dead. Perhaps she described my family as judgmental and explained that she needed respected mentors beside her so she would not enter a traditional wedding alone. I turned that question over until Thursday morning. Then a reminder appeared on our shared calendar. Lunch with Robert and Vivian. The Lark, West Bloomfield. Saturday, 12:30. Beneath it, Megan had written, "I cannot wait for you to finally meet them. This means everything to me." I stared at the words. Then I thought about Nancy pressing the unopened birthday card toward me. I called my father from the parking garage beneath our office. "I need to talk to you. Come to the house." 20 minutes later, I sat at my parents' kitchen table in Grosse Pointe. It was the same table where Megan had laughed, charmed my mother, and learned exactly how much family mattered to us. I told my father everything. The identification. The address. Gerald and Nancy. The wedding money. The return cards. The false text. Robert and Vivian Callahan. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, the kitchen remained silent. Then he asked, "What do you need?" 4 words. No lecture. No satisfaction that his concerns had been justified. No demand that I end the engagement immediately. Only the question that mattered. "I need to attend the lunch," I said. And then I need to arrange something larger. He nodded. What about the Bennetts? I will return to Saginaw after the lunch. I want to ask whether they are willing to be present for what comes next. What comes next? A family dinner, I said. A real one. With the correct people sitting in the room. My father considered this, stood, straightened his jacket, and said, I will speak with your mother about the restaurant. That was the entire discussion. My mother's response was less restrained. She entered from the living room, where she had apparently heard every word. In our house, listening from another room is not considered eavesdropping. It is participation without interruption. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded. She ate my spanakopita, Nico. I almost smiled. Ma. In my house. Her mother is in Saginaw getting birthday cards returned unopened, and this woman sat at my table eating my food. I know. Those poor people. I know, Ma. She crossed the kitchen and held my face between both hands, as she had done since I was a child whenever she wanted my complete attention. You make this right, she said quietly. Not only for yourself. For them. Saturday arrived. The Lark in West Bloomfield had the atmosphere of old money, dim lighting, heavy menus, quiet service, and the unspoken promise that everyone inside belonged to a world not advertised outside. Megan made the reservation. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a seat facing the entrance. They entered together. Megan walked in the center, one hand looped through Robert Callahan's arm. Vivian moved on his other side. Megan wore a pale dress and the expression of someone delivering a carefully planned gift. Robert approached with the confidence visible in every photograph. Vivian smiled with elegant restraint. I stood. Nico, Megan said warmly, this is my father, Robert, and my mother, Vivian. Not Gerald. Not Nancy. Robert. Vivian. I shook both hands. I have heard so much about you. The sentence was technically true now, though not in the way they believed. We sat. For the next 20 minutes, I watched Megan perform with remarkable fluency. She referenced childhood memories that had never happened. A vacation near Traverse City. A restaurant they supposedly visited for birthdays. A family joke about Robert's driving. Vivian followed carefully, smiling a fraction too late at times, as if recalling notes. Robert was smoother. He asked intelligent questions about commercial property and discussed Detroit finance with the ease of a man who had prepared for my profession. They were all acting. And I played my part. I asked respectful questions. I complimented their daughter. I smiled. I ate. At one point, I set down my fork. So, Robert, Megan has told me how important you have been in her life. He smiled. She has been like family to us. Like family. There it was. That means a great deal, I said, looking directly at Megan. She beamed. Then I leaned forward in the manner I use during negotiations when I want people to believe I am inviting them into confidence. My family is traditional, I said. We take the formal parts seriously. My parents would never forgive me if we reached the wedding without properly welcoming the people who matter most to Megan. Robert nodded. So we would like to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing enormous. Family, dinner, a few toasts. A chance for everyone to meet before the ceremony. Robert glanced toward Vivian. The look lasted less than a second. Calculation. Then he smiled. We would be honored. Under the table, Megan seized my hand. Her grip was tight with relief and triumph. Perfect, I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, radiant and certain she had won. The trap was complete. She stepped into it willingly. During the 6 days that followed, I moved quietly. On Monday, I drove back to Saginaw. I called Gerald from the driveway. He opened the door before I had time to knock. We sat at the same kitchen table. Nancy served the same coffee. This time, nobody pretended the conversation would be easy. I told them about Robert and Vivian Callahan. I described the lunch. I explained that Megan had introduced them as her parents and that they had agreed to attend an engagement dinner with my family. Then I told Gerald and Nancy I wanted them there. Nancy's hands stopped around her mug. Nico, we do not want to create a scene. Nancy, my mother is going to stand in a church and welcome whoever walks through the doors as Megan's family. She deserves to know who those people actually are. Nancy looked down. And you have spent 2 years sending cards that came back unopened, I continued. You deserve to be in that room. Not to humiliate Megan. Not to shout. Simply because you are her parents and someone needs to say the truth aloud. Gerald placed his hand over Nancy's. He looked at me. What time should we arrive? On Tuesday, I met with my father and Uncle Theo in my father's home office. I explained the plan from beginning to end. My father asked 2 precise questions about timing and seating, then said, I will handle the restaurant. Theo reacted as expected. I want to speak to her at the door. No. 1 sentence. No. Half a sentence. Theo, you will say nothing until I stand for the toast. He looked upward as though asking heaven why it had assigned him such an unreasonable nephew. I am asking you to do the hardest thing you have ever done, I said. Remain silent. He narrowed his eyes. Fine. But I want a double serving of tiro pita before anyone sits down, and I am holding the door when we leave. That can be arranged. Every piece was placed. My father selected Pegasus Taverna in downtown Detroit. It was the right choice. The restaurant felt like a family home rather than a performance space. The private dining room had white linen, warm lights, candles, and enough space for everyone to see everyone else. My mother chose the menu herself and placed a small framed photograph of my grandparents on the welcome table. They should be present, she said. Gerald and Nancy planned to drive down Saturday morning and stay at a hotel in Dearborn. Gerald called Thursday evening to confirm. After reviewing the timing, he became quiet. Nico, whatever happens in that room, thank you for driving to Saginaw. I did not know what to say. He continued. She chose a good man, even if she does not understand it. I will see you Saturday, Gerald. Friday night, I pressed my suit. I climbed into bed beside Megan, who was already asleep, and stared at the ceiling. I imagined Gerald carefully hanging his navy blazer in a hotel room. I imagined Nancy checking the burgundy dress she had chosen and wondering whether her daughter would look at her with love, hatred, or nothing at all. I thought about the garden hose lying across the Bennett driveway. The returned birthday cards. The kitchen where two people had waited 2 years for someone to knock. Someone had finally knocked. The next night, they would walk through another door. You can build a lie as tall as a tower. But the moment the people erased from its foundation and enter the room, every floor begins to shake. Saturday morning arrived with a stillness that did not come from peace. It came from certainty. Megan spent nearly 3 hours getting ready. I sat in the living room with football highlights playing quietly and allowed her every minute. She came out twice. Once to ask about earrings. Once to choose between 2 pairs of shoes. Both times, I told her she looked beautiful. She did. The problem had never been her appearance. The problem was what she believed beauty entitled her to hide. She wanted to leave early to check the room. "I have one call to finish," I told her. "Go ahead. I will meet you there." She kissed my cheek, picked up her coat, and walked out looking like a woman whose future had aligned perfectly. As soon as the door closed, I called Gerald. He answered on the first ring. "You ready?" "We are ready." His voice was controlled. "Nancy?" "She is dressed. She is nervous, but she is ready." When I send the message, "Walk in. Whatever is happening at the table, just enter and stand there. You do not have to say anything." A pause. "Gerald, she will see you immediately." "I know. I want you prepared." "Nico," he said, stopping me, "I have been prepared for 2 years. Since the night she blocked our numbers. Since Nancy's birthday passed without a call. Since every envelope came back." His voice tightened only once. "We will be there." I held the phone for a moment after the call ended. Then I put on my jacket, checked the inside pocket for the engagement ring, and left. Pegasus Taverna on a Saturday evening smelled of lemon, garlic, roasted lamb, and fresh bread. The main dining room carried the warm noise of families eating together. The private room in back felt more deliberate. My mother had arrived at 4. When I entered at 6:30, she was adjusting flowers with the focused intensity of a woman who understood that the details of a room tell guests how seriously they are being received. She looked at me. "You all right?" "Yes, Ma." "You are sure?" "I am sure." She crossed the room and held my face. "Your grandfather used to say truth always finds the largest chair in the room, even when nobody invites it." She smoothed my collar. "Let it sit down tonight." For a moment, I nearly lost the composure I had carried all week. My father stood near the bar speaking with Nick Jr. He wore his charcoal suit and looked completely calm. When I approached, he gave me one slow nod. "Everything is ready. Do what you came to do." Uncle Theo sat at a side table with a full plate of tiro pita and the concentration of a man fulfilling sacred terms. He pointed to the plate, then to me. "I kept my promise. Remember yours." I nodded. At 7, I heard Megan's laugh in the hallway before the door opened. It was her social laugh, half a note higher than the one she used at home, designed to make a room feel celebratory before she entered. She came in first wearing a navy dress. Her hair was perfect. Every detail had been selected. Robert followed in an expensive suit. Vivian entered beside him with pearls at her throat. Megan moved through the room as if she had rehearsed every greeting. She kissed my mother on both cheeks. She held my father's hand in both of hers. She laughed near the drinks table and touched Vivian's arm with daughterly affection. She was extraordinary. Beautiful. Confident. Terrifyingly convincing. When she reached me, she slipped one arm through mine. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted." "I know," I said. "That is why I arranged it." She heard romance. I meant truth. We took our seats. Food arrived in generous waves: grilled fish, lamb chops, potatoes, salads, warm pita, dishes my mother had approved personally. Conversation filled the room. Robert asked my father about property development. His interest appeared genuine. Vivian complimented my mother on the restaurant. My mother accepted graciously while keeping her real thoughts behind a smile only I could read. Megan glowed. She believed the most difficult part of her lie had succeeded. I laughed where appropriate. I refilled wine glasses. I asked questions. I looked like a man enjoying the union of two families. My phone rested face down inside my jacket pocket. One message waited to be sent. At 7:48, a quiet pause appeared between the main course and dessert. Megan was laughing at something Robert had said. I removed my phone under the table and typed one word to Gerald. "Now." Then I stood. I tapped a knife lightly against my glass. The sound moved through the room, clean and clear. Conversation stopped. Megan looked up at me with a radiant expression. She expected a toast about love. I allowed the silence to last one beat longer than comfortable. "I want to thank everyone for being here," I began. My voice was calm. "In my family, a dinner like this is not simply a celebration. It is a declaration. It means we recognize the people at this table as real, important, and connected to what comes next." I looked slowly around the room. "My father taught me that the people you bring to your table tell the world who you are." I paused. "So tonight, I want to make certain the right people are sitting in this room." Near the back wall, the restaurant manager met my eyes. He opened the side door. Gerald and Nancy Bennett walked in. Gerald wore the navy blazer he had probably owned for years, the kind reserved for weddings, funerals, and events that mattered too much to risk buying something unfamiliar. Nancy wore a burgundy dress and held a small purse with both hands. Her chin was lifted. She moved with the quiet dignity of a woman determined not to collapse before reaching the place where she needed to stand. They entered the room. Megan saw them. I had positioned myself so I could watch her face. The color disappeared from it all at once. Her lips parted. The wineglass in her hand tilted. Without looking away from her, I reached over, steadied the glass, and placed it on the table. She turned toward me. Her eyes moved rapidly, searching for an explanation, a new story, any path that might return control. "Nico." Her voice was barely sound. "I went to Saginaw," I said. I spoke quietly, not for drama, but because the truth did not need volume. 3 weeks ago, I drove north because I thought maybe I could help repair something for you. I imagined bringing your family back into your life as a wedding gift. The room held its breath. I found a man watering flowers on Maple Avenue in a Detroit Tigers shirt. I introduced myself, and he dropped the hose. Megan swallowed. Your father delivered mail for 31 years. Your mother served as a school secretary through most of your childhood. They paid your tuition at the University of Michigan so you could graduate without debt. You do not understand everything, she began. I continued. They offered you $15,000 for the wedding. Money they could provide without destroying their retirement. You told them that if they could not fund your future, you had no place in it. Her mouth remained open. No words came. I sat in their kitchen. I saw your photographs. I held a birthday card your mother sent to our address and received back unopened. I paused. And while I was sitting across from them, you texted me that your parents had apologized and wanted lunch. I turned toward Robert and Vivian Callahan. Vivian's hands rested flat against the table. Her face had gone pale. Robert had become completely still. Robert, Vivian, I believe I know what Megan told you. Neither responded. She told you my family was traditional and judgmental. She told you she had no parents who could stand beside her. Perhaps she said they were dead. Perhaps she said they had been absent or abusive. Then she asked two respected mentors to help her enter a wedding without facing questions. Vivian looked at Megan. The look lasted several seconds. It contained something more severe than anger. Recognition. The realization that the person she thought she knew had been assembled for her benefit. She used your kindness, I said, and your reputation, to fill 2 chairs in a story. I gestured toward Gerald and Nancy. But those are Megan's parents. Robert folded his napkin once and placed it beside his plate. It was the gesture of a man who had decided to leave and saw no purpose in speaking first. I faced Megan again. She no longer searched for an exit. There was none. Every wall of the life she had constructed reflected her back from the faces around the table. I grew up watching my father judge people by how they treated those who had nothing to offer them, I said. The person parking the car. The employee cleaning the office. The retired postal worker who gives everything he can and is told it is not enough. I reached into my jacket. That is the standard I was raised with. Not an address. Not a title. Not clothing or connections. I looked at her. By that standard, I do not know the woman sitting in front of me. I removed the engagement ring from my pocket. I did not throw it. I did not slam it down. I placed it gently on the white tablecloth before her, the way you set down something heavy when you finally accept it does not belong in your hands. Then I lifted the floral centerpiece from the center of the table. White flowers. Simple and elegant. My mother had chosen them. I carried them across the room to Nancy Bennett. Nancy had been holding herself together through force. I could see it in her jaw, her shoulders, and her short careful breaths. I held out the flowers. She looked at them. Then at me. Then at her daughter. Finally, she accepted them. And she came apart. Not loudly. There was no dramatic cry. It was the quiet collapse of 2 years of grief finally discovering a safe place to go. Gerald had one arm around her before the first sound escaped. His eyes were wet, but his chin stayed steady. He looked at me over Nancy's head. Then he stepped forward and extended his free hand. I took it. His grip was hard. A message his voice could not carry. I held it for a moment. When I released him, my father stood beside me. I did not hear Stavros approach. My father has always had a way of appearing precisely when a moment requires him. He studied Gerald, then offered his hand. "I am Stavros," he said. "I should have met you much earlier. I am sorry we did not." Gerald shook his hand. "I am Gerald." He swallowed. "Thank you for raising a man like that." My father glanced toward me. Only for a second. In 35 years, I had never seen more pride in his face. My mother did not offer Nancy a handshake. She crossed the distance and pulled her into both arms. Immediate. Unconditional. The way Greek mothers hold people who have spent too long pretending they do not need to be held. Nancy held on. The white flowers remained between them. We left the room together. The Papa Demetrius and the Bennetts. My mother walked with one arm linked through Nancy's. My father and Gerald moved side by side with the quiet ease of two men who had recognized the same values in each other. Nick Jr. held the door. Uncle Theo came last. At the main entrance, he stopped. He turned back once. I looked too. Megan remained seated at the center of the table in her perfect navy dress. The engagement ring rested on the linen before her. The flowers were gone. Robert and Vivian stood near the opposite side of the room. Vivian had already put on her coat. Robert placed one hand near the small of her back as they moved toward the exit without looking at Megan. Several of Megan's friends remained seated, uncomfortable and silent. These were people from the polished world she had chosen, people for whom she had edited her name, family, and past. Nobody moved toward her. Nobody offered a new version of events. Nobody played the role she needed. The entire cast had walked away from the performance. For the first time, Megan was completely seen. Thea looked at her for a long moment. He did not shout. He did not deliver the speech he had wanted. He only shook his head once, slowly, almost sadly. Then he allowed the door to close. Outside, the September air was cool and clean. Downtown Detroit continued around us, indifferent to what had happened inside. I stood beside my father and breathed. He placed one hand at the back of my neck, the same gesture he had used since I was a boy. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he spoke. "Your grandfather would have done the same." That was all. Across the sidewalk, Gerald looked up at the Detroit skyline while Nancy stood tucked under his arm with the flowers in her hands. They breathed the cool air like people who had been given back something they had stopped expecting to recover. Gerald caught my eye. He nodded. It was not exactly gratitude. It was recognition. I nodded back. Some deals are completed for money. Some are completed because there is no version of yourself you could respect if you walked away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life. I did not earn a dollar. In the days that followed, Megan called repeatedly. Her first messages were furious. She accused me of humiliating her in public, invading her private history, and destroying relationships at work. She said I had believed strangers over the woman I planned to marry. Then the anger softened. She admitted she had been ashamed of the house in Saginaw, ashamed that her father delivered mail, and ashamed that her mother worked in a school office. After entering a corporate world filled with wealthy clients and polished executives, she became convinced that her ordinary background would make people see her as ordinary too. She insisted that she loved me. Perhaps she did. But love that requires innocent people to disappear is not strong enough to build a marriage. Robert Callahan contacted me once. His message confirmed what I had suspected. Megan told him and Vivian that both of her parents had died years earlier. She described my family as deeply traditional and said she feared entering the wedding without anyone beside her. Robert and Vivian agreed to act as honorary parental figures because they believed they were helping a younger colleague through grief. They apologized directly to Gerald and Nancy. Neither remained in Megan's life. Gerald and Nancy did not celebrate the collapse of her lie. That told me more about them than every photograph in their house. Nancy asked whether Megan had somewhere safe to stay. Gerald wondered whether she would eventually call. Parents can be wounded by a child and still worry about that child's dinner, shelter, and future. The heart does not become practical merely because respect should. 2 weeks later, my parents invited the Bennetts to Sunday dinner. Nancy brought a pie. My mother protested that guests were not supposed to bring food, then served the entire thing and demanded the recipe. Gerald and my father spent most of the afternoon discussing the Tigers, retirement, and the cost of everything. Uncle Theo repeated the same Greek yogurt joke he had told the night I met Megan. Gerald laughed. There was one empty chair at the table. Nobody mentioned it. For a while, I thought of the engagement dinner as revenge. Eventually, I understood that revenge had not been the purpose. I had not invented a lie to injure Megan. I had invited the people she removed. The truth did everything else. I also had to admit my own failure. I ignored missing pieces because I wanted the future Megan promised. No childhood friends appeared. No relatives called. No family photographs existed in her apartment. Every story ended exactly where questions might begin, and I considered myself compassionate for refusing to ask. Sometimes restraint is kindness. Sometimes it is fear wearing the clothes of kindness. My father had been right. You do not have to repair every broken family, but before tying your future to someone, you should know whether the people inside the story are real. Megan moved away from Detroit several months later. I heard she accepted a position in Chicago. I did not follow her life after that. The wedding date passed quietly. My father scheduled a property inspection that morning. Uncle Theo arrived for dinner carrying enough food for 15 people and pretended he had forgotten the date. It may have been the kindest performance in the entire story. The engagement ring was sold. I donated the money to a scholarship fund for first-generation students in Saginaw County. Gerald and Nancy learned about it through the foundation announcement. Nancy called me and cried. I was not heartbroken because I stopped loving Megan the moment the side door opened. I was heartbroken because the woman I loved and the woman who existed occupied the same body but were not the same person. That kind of loss has no funeral. For months, I questioned every memory. Was her laughter at Theo's joke real? Did she genuinely care about my mother's recipes? Did she love my family, or did she love what joining us would prove? Eventually, I accepted that several things could be true together. Megan may have loved me. She may also have loved the status she imagined marriage would give her. A person can feel genuine affection while practicing profound deception. The affection does not cancel the damage. What stayed with me most was not Megan's face when Gerald and Nancy entered. It was Nancy holding the white flowers while my mother wrapped both arms around her. It was Gerald shaking my father's hand. It was two families finally meeting honestly, even though the marriage meant to connect them was already over. If you have ever felt ashamed because your family lived modestly, remember the Bennetts. There is dignity in a small home maintained with care. There is honor in 31 years of delivering other people's letters. There is love in saving slowly so a daughter can graduate without debt. Those things may not impress a room filled with executives. They matter more. The right people do not require wealthy parents standing behind you. They require honesty standing beside you. I once drove to Saginaw worried that Megan's parents might decide I was not good enough for their daughter. By the time I returned, I understood I had been asking the wrong question. The question was whether Megan had become someone willing to honor the people who loved her before the world learned her name. At the engagement dinner, she answered without speaking. Some deals earn money. Some secure buildings or reshape companies. The most important deal I ever completed did none of those things. It placed the correct parents in the correct room. It returned flowers to the woman who had earned them. And it reminded me that family is not a costume people wear when it improves the picture. Family is who keeps sending a birthday card after the last one comes back unopened. Whenever I remember Megan now, I do not first see the black dress from the fundraiser or the ring beneath the rooftop lights. I see a garden hose falling onto a driveway in Saginaw. I see Gerald Bennett's face when he understood someone had finally come looking. Truth rarely arrives with music or dramatic timing. Sometimes it appears in a faded Tigers shirt, wearing reading glasses above its forehead and watering flowers on an ordinary Saturday morning. But after you meet it, you cannot return to the ledge. If this story stayed with you, share what you would have done at that dinner and tell me where you are listening from. Subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, dignity, and the moment silence finally ends. Until next time, never be ashamed of the people who loved you before anyone else knew your name.